Welcome back to Ferocious Education. This is Zed. Today I'm going to be talking about the ticker OPK, OPKO Health Incorporations. I'm going to go briefly through technical analysis, significant support levels, and entry points, and then I'm going to go through the rest of the due diligence into finding anything that I could find about this company, latest news, and everything I could find in terms of SEC filings. Let's jump right into it. On the 1 week perspective, what we get to see here is that it attempted a reversal on the week of 11th of October and it got rejected, and looks like it's actually attempting continuation towards a negative trend. On an 80x, it shows in a potential trend forming here sometime soon. 80 willing percent R puts this one at oversold at the current levels. Volume is increasing, but the moving averages do look bullish going to bearish. Now, on a 1 day perspective, what we get to see here is something very similar. Negative reversal was seen somewhere around the 23rd of October, and then it actually went through with it and continued to go towards the negative side. Outflow is more than inflow, and the moving averages went from bullish to bearish. 80x shows in a sloppy movement, and willing percent R shows in a trend moving towards oversold, so it's not yet oversold, and the momentum looks like it's actually slowing down. Moving averages, this one is expected to trade between 382 on the bottom on the band, 425 in the middle, and 467 on the top. Although we get to see it didn't actually fall through with that. Now, coming in towards the stochastic fast and slow, basically what we want to go on is in a period similar to this one here. You get to see it hasn't hit that yet, but it's very much on the way to do so. We could be lucky if we get to see something very similar to what we've seen around this region. On the stochastic slow, what we get to see here is that it still didn't accumulate yet, and it might have a little bit of a more further on negative trend. And I'm going to explain that in a second. Fibonacci retracement support sits at 316, 238, and resistances at 379 and 442. Now, significant supports and resistances, what we get to see here is the next support, well, other than the 354, we're looking down at 342. And then under 342 goes all the way down to 299, which is a very significant support, and then 289 and 284. Now, the reason that I'm saying that those ones are significant, you get to see here there was a previous trend that followed. But before mentioning that, let's take a quick look into resistances. 384 is current resistance, 421 above that, and then 4067 and following 524. Now, what we get to see here is we've seen an inverse cup, or what it looks like to be an inverse cup, accumulation bouncing off the previous support, because those are the previous supports. You get to see 1, 2, 3, and it bounced off really nicely, and we get to see another inverse cup here, and that's, I think, mainly due to the market being a little bit way too sloppy and unpredictable. And then we might be actually considering, well, instead of it just bouncing back at not a very strong support, what it tends to happen is that it falls down to support, rejects it, and then bounces back. So if I was to look at this one here, my entry would probably be somewhere around 299 to 286 or average down. Although, let's take a look into whether this one is bullish or not before trying to basically mention, oh, well, it's going to be falling down or not. We need to actually look into, is this one worth investing in? You always look at, is it worth investing in, and a good setup. You don't just throw your money into a good setup. Now, taking a quick look into the company here, OPKO. This is their website here, so you can actually go on and play around with it. So I'm going to go towards the latest news and their presentation. So the presentation here, OPKO, I'm going to try to zoom in so you can actually get a better perspective. There we go. And so they have basically three things that they mention here: market, pharmaceuticals, pipelines, and diagnostics. So for market pharmaceuticals, they have the Rayaldee addresses unmet need in CKD market to offer revenue of around $8.6 million in second quarter of 2020, and up to $787 million in milestone with tiered double-digit royalties. And it actually partnered in Japan with Japan Tobacco for up to $112 million in milestone with tiered double-digit royalties. The current pipelines they have is the Somatrogon once weekly hGH-CTP that partnered with Pfizer, successful pivot to phase 3 studies, as well as that was announced on October 2019, and successful Japan phase 3 study completed with positive data top line around June 2020. It also initiated multiple drug trials in various areas with unmet demands. Diagnostic BioReference Laboratory revenue of around $251 million in second quarter 2020. Significant response to COVID-19 pandemic is around 5.2 million PCR tests performed as of September 13th, 2020. Leader in mobile testing sites in federal, state, and local partnerships, and around 300-person sale marketing team drives the industry, leading testing and recognized leader in genetic testing. Coming in next is basically their endpoints. I'm not going to go through very much details, but the study itself, the details we might be expecting to hear. The submissions of the NDA for Phase 3 around first half of 2021. So that's coming up soon. Moving on, next is the participation for Phase 3. What we get to see here is you have it all around the world. So around 106 clinical sites across 22 countries. So it's quite massive. And what we need to look at is catalysts. So the path to approval, basically the BLA submissions is anticipated in the second half of 2020. So we're in that already. And the study has been completed in 2020 for the MAA submission in Europe. And the NDA submission in Japan is anticipated in the first half of 2021. So there is some things to be considered here in terms of announcements coming up. Next thing coming up is their Rayaldee, the one that has a lot of royalties coming into it. So there is a lot of money, as we've seen in the first couple slides, anticipated to come out of this one in terms of royalties. And basically the top line data is expected around second quarter 2021, so that's quite far ahead. So I'm just going to move across from there. And FDA approval for Phase 2 study with Rayaldee in COVID-19 patients, that is as well on the way. And basically the patient screening to commence later in September or in October 2020 for completion expected prior to end of year 2020. That's another PR still in the barrel, so we can expect that to come in by. Next thing is their pipeline. That's a bit more exciting. So Pfizer is actually working with them as well for growth hormone deficiency for GHD for adults and children, and that's actually in Phase 3 with once weekly injections. Next thing here is the hemophilia, so the Factor VIIa, CTP IVs, and the CS for around $0.6 billion in terms of market size. That is going between Phase 1 and Phase 2, so expect something around there as well. And IGVF deficiency and bowel disorders, that's still going on preclinical, so still time to progress there. Diagnostics, which is something I'm very excited about, and this is why it's actually been rallying recently. It goes on to multiple things for targeted expertise in terms of diagnostics. Right, you got things like COVID-19, influenza A and B. So that is something that we're looking at. But basically, they have a dedicated platform for such program. Now, what we want to look at here. Last things is their balance sheet. So cash and cash equivalent market securities around $20.6 million. And another thing is they have common shares outstanding for around $670 million. So what we want to look at is whether they need to make an offering in the future, just to be, careful. From what I've seen here is from their revenues. They have around $301 million compared to $226 million from second quarter 2020 to 2019. So they're actually net positive, and I'll go through that in a second. And so I don't think they will need to create an offering sometime soon. Now, the highlights for the third quarter, and that was announced on the 29th, BioReference Laboratories COVID PCR tests volume increased around 61% over the second quarter of 2020. Positive Somatrogon Phase 3 top line results reported from crossover studies, and global regulatory submissions for Pfizer remaining on schedule. That is as well going on. A lot of positive news. I'm not going to go through every single one. We'll be here all day. But what I want to look at is their actual new PR came out on October 20th. That the new test that they're launching. That basically is one for COVID-19 and influenza A/B test, and that can basically determine whether they have the flu or COVID-19. Now, coming in towards their financials, and that's a bit more exciting for me, is their cash. For instance, you get to see the cash has decreased substantially, but their total assets around $2.3 million, that's in thousands, sorry, 2.3 billion compared to 2.31 billion. And what we're looking at here is their cash is around 36 million compared to 85 million. But if we go down all the way towards revenue, we get to see the total revenue is 428 million compared to 228 million, with a current net income of around 23 million compared to a loss of the same time last year of around $62 million. So that is something to consider. In terms of net income, you're getting around 0.04 net income compared to 0.11. So that is a massive improvement where they actually have become profitable. Now, coming in towards their, let's say, the latest news for that is their addition for shares around $3.99 and $4.01 for one of their staffs, one of their directors. So that is something telling you that they bought around $4. Now, coming in towards seeing the price action, we're right now around 352. So they've actually bought around this region here. And with such a really good financial balance sheet, this one definitely did not warrant a massive drop. But what we've seen is with the markets so shaky with the elections and everything, after the elections happen, or perhaps sometime next week, if it does actually drop down to 299 to 289, I'm definitely throwing some money into it. Not a substantial, massive fee, but you know, this one here has become profitable. I like the setup here, and I'm considering buying in somewhere around the 289 to 299 range if it does dip down below, depending on the market action as well. So I really like this stock in terms of the setup. I think there's potential, and I would say I'm somewhat bullish into it in the future. What do you think about this ticker? Make sure to mention down in the comments below. Share, subscribe, and like it. Have a wonderful day.